Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Paodcast, presented by the Daily Pao.
This is Pranuti,
Amit,
and Purva. And we're from the Daily Pao, a Bombay-specific culture and food website. And this is our fortnightly podcast, and it's called The Paodcast. Okay, so now the Paodcast is going to be on Sawan. And
which is great
because a lot more of you will be able to listen to us, from a few hundreds to hopefully tens of thousands. So make sure that you download the app and follow us on Savan.
Yeah, and you'll still be able to sort of access it through our website. We'll just take you to a link to
the Savan app,
to the Savan app, and to our podcast, and so everything will be as usual. And Saban also has some pretty decent music, so where you can check out all the other stuff. It's a pretty good app. I mean, and
okay, stop, Amit. Okay, so
they're not paying me to say this, okay? So
okay, we'll be back with Bombay Binge.
Bombay Binge.
So welcome to Bombay Binge, and in this section we talk about food in the city, and we'll be talking about an exciting trend that we've noticed recently, and that is restaurants sourcing local produce, and some restaurants even growing their produce. So Purva's going to tell us a little more about this. So you went to Farmer and Sons recently, and Farmer and Sons advertises itself as a farm-to-table restaurant. So do you want to tell us what that is?
Well, Farmer and Sons it's an all-day restaurant in Fort. It's run by Nico Gogawala, who moved here from Sri Lanka, which is where he was running a restaurant which was also like a farm-to-table concept. So,
and by the way, this is the guy who is... his wife is more famous. She's Kamal Sidhu, the very hot
VJ.
MTV VJ Kamal Sidhu. Right,
yes.
Carry on.
So, this is Nico's second restaurant in the city, and he tried this similar concept with Nico Bombay, but it bombed. Now, Farmer and Sons has good food. I gave it a decent review. It's very produce-driven. Veggies are very fresh, crisp. They claim that they're using... artisanal cheeses, but that's something I found out from their public relations person and not from the menu, which is something I found baffling, because if you're pitching yourself as a farm to table, or even saying that okay, we're produce driven or whatever, you need to give me provenance, because if you're bringing it to the consumer's attention that we're taking care to bring you something that's straight from farms to your table, but you're not really giving us any information about it. And I even, asked for more information while writing up the review, saying that, can you tell us where anything else is from? And they said, no, our cheese is from South India, and that's it. And that was like really vague, and I'm like, what is the point of this?
The staff, were they not all forthcoming about what where all the stuff comes from?
Well, I think they were just kind of baffled with a really large order.
But there are some restaurants that do list the provenance
in the same area, in fact. So there's the Pantry, which without actually making the claim, what was interesting was in the initial weeks that I went, when Pantry had just opened, they had a little board that sort of had little bulletins about where they were sourcing their cheese from. For example, they were the ones who first popularized Pondi, like cheeses from Pondicherry, so Oroville and...
Right, they were using the Lofabu of La Femme.
Yeah, and there are more sort of cheese makers in Pondicherry now, even before, now there are, but when they started, there was just I think they were just getting it from Oroville.
Yeah, that were being sourced from.
The Pantry has been, really attentive to this detail. In fact, their menu will tell you that they're getting their teas from Vrindavan Farm, which is in Maharashtra. They're getting their cheese from Pondi. They're getting vanilla from some plantation in South India. So I kind of appreciate that, because...
Which is great, because, so many restaurants thrive on saying that, we import all our...
Exactly. And there is a shift, which is exciting. It's a really small shift, actually, because I think... I mean, as a consumer, my first concern is this food going to taste good? But, I think the kind of foodies there are right now, I think everybody's very into sourcing and locavorism and, just...
Because it's fresh, right? The closer, the
mindful
shorter
eating,
the
I
distance
think.
between sort of the farm to the table,
Right.
the more fresher food is going to be.
And it's also a smaller ecological footprint because you don't have, thousands of gallons of jet fuel that have gone into bringing that stuff over here.
Yeah, so I mean, what exactly do people mean when they say farm to table?
So basically, what it essentially means is you are completely involved in the growing and harvesting. That's the original concept when it was sort of a rage in California and stuff like that, where you're controlling what you're
so you know
serving.
exactly what's happening to the food that's going into your plate.
But it's not entirely the case here.
Okay.
So I think it's incorrect to say that there's a farm-to-table movement in Bombay, but there are, like I said, there are little
what it is I think
smaller
it's more
attempts at it.
And it's this sort of knowing the provenance of your food, right? Knowing
Right.
where it's coming from.
So
Maybe
there's-
we're not controlling the process.
So, for example, the table in Kulaba, they have a little farm patch in Alibag.
Yeah.
It's like a personal home. They're growing veggies which are then being used in their salads. So that's like a small example of how farm to table ought to be.
Yeah.
And La Folie Lab, which is in Bandra, which is the cafe version of the dessert, the patisserie chain, they have a little sort of garden of micro herbs and greens and, just a few salad items.
Yeah.
And why they're doing that is because they can then... They pepper those with the salads, and they're saying that we can control the flavor of the herbs, and that really impacts the taste of the final product. So there are these small attempts.
And this is basically this is for the savory items that they serve out of their Bandra,
the Bandra Cafe,
which is the only one that actually serves like
savory food.
But let's also talk about some of the popular places where people source ingredients from. Like a lot of people now are getting their cheeses from South India. You mentioned Auroville is one place, and we recently did a cheese story.
There's a lot of there's cheese, chocolates, and coffee. There's a lot of that sort of being employed by restaurants. Prawn, you drink a lot of the coffee that, like, say, Blue Tokai or.
Right. So Love 15 Cafe, I think you mentioned, is serving Blue Tokai coffee. They're a company in Delhi, and they sell single estate coffees which are sourced from South India.
Yeah, and soon to open a roastery in Bombay, in fact.
In Lower Parel. And Farmer and Sons, I don't know if you saw, they have these menus scratched on mirrors. So their coffee is Frowner's Coffee, which is sold by a Bombay company called the Indian Bean, which again gets its coffee from South India. But teas, I think...
So teas are coming... Well, Vrindavan Farm is actually supplying teas, vegetables and mangoes. Mangoes is like their
mainstay.
Their mainstay. And they're supplying to Indigo Delhi, Table, Pantry, the Saltwater Cafe, Smokehouse Delhi. In fact, when Impresario hosts their sort of slightly underground dinners at the St. Jude Project, which is helmed by Gresham Fernandez, she supplies a lot of vegetables and fruits for those dinners as well.
This is the Vrindavan Farm.
This is Vrindavan Farm, and what's very exciting is that Vrindavan sends out a weekly newsletter that you can get on through their website, and just you and I can go and pick up veggies as long as you're willing to travel to town. She's at Churchgate. You can pick up teas, vegetables, preserves, and every week they have like a new batch. So it could be moringa, chikkus. Mangoes are not yet in, but best mangoes I've eaten. In fact, that's the other thing. So if you don't have the facility if you don't have your own farm patch, you can. There are now ways to sort of, there are people who are managing farms and then supplying to the restaurant. So there's also, then that reduces the sort of gap between the restaurateur or the chef and the grower, which is very exciting. So for example, just taking mangoes, which are, everybody, you have to obsess about them in the summer. There are websites like All Things Organic, Hafus.com, there's Vrindavan Farm. They're all... So Vrindavan grows its own farm. Hafus has set up little units in Ratnagiri, and so has Place of Origin. They wrote to us recently, and you can just write to them. Now you know where your mangoes are coming from. They taste spectacularly different from what's coming from.
But why is it that they taste different? Is it because, I suppose there's more attention that's being paid to the cultivation?
Exactly.
Because soil, obviously,
But,
plays a huge...
No artificial ripening, lesser pesticide use.
So can you go and actually see these places? Because, you're basically going by their word, right?
So Vrindavan you can. I know that Gayatri, who runs the farm, she encourages it. In fact, you can just write to her, and if you're very interested, she spends maximum all her time at the farm and very few days in the city. That you can. With Places of Origin, Hafus and stuff, they're fairly new. So it's something that, it's something worth inquiring about. In fact, All Things Organic, which supplies other fruits and vegetables, they have a farm traceability program, which I think is very important. Because if you're saying all this, we're working with farmers and we're in these areas, I want to know what farms these are. Are they legit?
Exactly.
Because it's like having a charity and saying, but is my money going to the right place?
Yeah.
So, that's something that's happening. For example, Pooja Dhingra, who's got the Low 15 patisserie chain and Low 15 cafe now in Kolaba, she gets raspberries from a supplier in Bombay who's used his sort of family farm property, and he's growing raspberries, and they're very seasonal. They're just like from October to December or something like that. But I've bought raspberries as well, and they're fantastic. They're slightly steep, but...
Yeah.
But this way you also, you use seasonal produce, which is also good, right? Because you're not using, veggies that are, grown the entire year round. They're kind of suspicious, because how are you, growing tomatoes in a weather that's not suitable for them?
And this sort of consciousness is seeping in. It's not just restaurateurs with chains and who can afford to pay a little extra for good produce. There's also Bhakti Mehta of Little Food Daily. She's just set up it's a daily meal catering service that's only run out of Andheri right now. But their idea as a company, once they scale up operations across Bombay, is to source the word, I'm sort of hesitant to use the word organic, but to source directly from farmers. And so they're looking at farms in Delhi. There's Usha Farms, there's Krishi Crest. Usha Farms apparently supplies all types of mushrooms. Krishi Crest is growing microgreens and edible flowers. I actually spoke to the owner, Achintya Anand, and he said that they supply to Indian Accent and other popular Delhi restaurants. And very interesting that, things like microgreens and edible flowers, these are things that you also see now in homes. It's not like people are aware of.
Actually, edible flowers, it's, Bengalis eat edible flowers. It's a traditional thing, but I suppose you're seeing it in restaurants now.
Yeah.
It was actually quite a home thing.
What about the price factor? Because you did mention these, sort of raspberry being slightly steep, and, so because, in a way, you are actually going more local, so that should sort of affect your price. But at the same time, because you're sort of taking so much care to make sure that you're not using these shortcuts, it might be more
you are
expensive.
Paying a bit of a premium on all of this, but it really translates in the taste. And if you are the sort of person who's, say, expending X number of money on bar nights and stuff like that, I think there is the type of person who also wants to eat better. So places like Kaboom, run by Johan and Kunali Datubai, they are they host like farm workshops and slow food movement gatherings, and I like that it's seeping into, like, if caterers are thinking about this, first time restaurateurs are thinking about this. Is very exciting, because ultimately then you as a consumer will be like, hey, they got this cheese from Oroville, maybe I should try getting some as well. And that now a lot of these are being sold over the counter. Exactly. A lot of artisanal chocolates, coffees, cheese.
So it's not just the restaurants. As a consumer, I can also, like you said, Vrindavan Farms, you can just sort of go and get, you don't have to rely on the restaurants to get access to the stuff. You can get it access.
Absolutely. And I think that is, for me, that is the big part about this, because you're educating the layperson to eat better and to know where your vegetables and where your food is coming from.
And really going back to an older form of eating. Like, this is how, people of 2 generations above us used to eat.
But that's what...
And growing your own, like, little herb gardens. It's encouraging that.
I find it kind of sad, though, that, sort of going back to the way that I think that people have just sort of move to that, and you can do that right now. I mean, you have people who have their own sort of balcony gardens nowadays, right?
Yeah,
And
but that's the
of-
thing with food, right? It's so cyclical.
Yeah.
Fads will come, the whole kale sort of
Yeah,
Uprising.
it's not. It's very rewarding to grow your own veggies, but it takes a lot of time and effort. So it's not a particularly easy thing.
Yeah.
Well, we can discuss that in a future podcast. So that was Bombay Binge. We'll be back with the scene.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says. A show that encapsulates everything in human history, from the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien, who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts on. You get one banana vada free with every podcast. Right. I'll just check that.
The scene.
We're back with the scene, and today we're going to talk about the recent revival of handmade textiles by indie designers, actually. And Pranti, who loves, this kind of stuff, is going to give us a lowdown.
This is what Pranti's waiting for her next salary for.
This is what I'm waiting.
splurge.
Yeah, the minute I
She's
get
made
a
a list.
salary, I'm gonna blow it up on clothes. Yeah, so in recent years, we've seen a sort of revival of handloom. Now, I mean, it's not like handloom went away anywhere. Our mothers and grandmothers wore handloom saris and salwar kameezes and, Western clothes made from handmade textiles. But, I mean, those of us who are not in the sari wearing generation, I mean, like, who among us wear saris to
those
work?
of us who have basically zero knowledge about fashion and need to know what exactly handloom is.
Well, handloom is essentially handmade fabric.
As opposed to synthetic, so now there is a Handloom Act in place, and this act stipulates that only weavers can make things like 100% cotton saris, 100% cotton silk, and lungis, and certain sort of combinations of these materials. So, for example, a power loom weaver, if he makes 100% cotton material, that's illegal. So you can't be doing this on a power loom. You have to be doing it on a hand loom. So that's what handloom means. So yeah, I mean, just in recent years, we've seen a lot of indie designers making Western clothes, like clothes with Western cuts and silhouettes, but using Indian textiles. Like ikat, for example, is suddenly very fashionable. And I mean, ikat, I suppose when we were growing up, we might have viewed it as a very old school material because, I remember my mom wearing ikat salwar kameezes all the time.
In college, when
and you never thought about it.
Yeah, like in college exhibitions of flea markets, I would never pick up ikat, and now I'm I gravitate to anything with ikat on
With
it.
ikat, so we're sort of looking at it with new eyes because it's suddenly become cool and suddenly become hip. So, for example, there's a fairly well-known stylist called Chandni Sareen, and she has a line of ikat clothes that have done pretty well. You get ikat shoes, you get ikat sandals, ikat bags. Everything ikat is suddenly very cool.
But why is this happening? Does it have a sort of distinct texture, distinct sort of design?
I mean, ikat is a very distinct design. I mean, it's from Orissa, and it's
patterns,
fairly, the patterns,
very distinctive.
The patterns are very distinct. Then Banarasi has always been very popular, but in the last couple of fashion weeks, we've seen a lot of this sort of Banarasi revival, lots of designers doing things with Banarasi. But what's also interesting is lesser known textiles. For example, we recently wrote about this indie designer called State of Play. That's what she calls her label. And she makes stuff, these very cool, sort of Nehru jacket type jackets and bomber jackets with the Assamese mekhala. And so the mekhala is this two-piece outfit worn by women. So it looks like a sari, except that it's divided into a skirt and a top with a pallu type thing.
Right.
So, people of our generation who are, removed from from handloom are
the Zara generation.
the Zara people who lean on things like
Yeah.
Mango and Zara.
Right.
I mean, suddenly you're finding about things like Mekhala and Madras checks.
Yeah.
Like there's this website called Tijori that sells some fantastic Madras cottons.
Yeah.
We also wrote about this designer called the Revival Project, and she uses Chettinad saris to make Western clothes. And these textiles lend themselves beautifully to Western clothes. So it's great. I mean, yes, in a sense, it's sort of silly because these textiles have always been there, and our mums and grandmoms have worn them, and we thought it was uncool at one point, and
Yeah, but
now
now
we
vintage
suddenly
is chic.
Vintage is
But
chic.
is that primarily because the use has changed? I mean, if you wanted to, you'd only see these kind of fabrics used in saris and used in like salwar kameezes. I mean, how would you sort of find this? And now you're seeing them used for Western wear with like dresses
props to the
and
designers,
tops
I
and-
think, for
Right.
sort of bringing it back in a different way, because I have to confess, I'm a mall rat. So for me, like it's all learning, right? Okay, ikat is one thing, but I had no idea about the Kunbi sari, which you said that Wendell has been sort of promoting.
Right.
via
So
his
a few
collections.
years ago, Wendell Rodericks, who lives in Goa, he started this project, of reviving the Kunbi sari, which was worn by a certain community.
It's in Goa, right?
It's in Goa, right? It's a Goan.
And I think that's more from a heritage point of view for himself. But I'd wonder how many people are actually going to go out and wear a Kunbi sari. I mean, I think that the
You'd be amazed. My
Yeah.
Facebook has been full of my friends hashtagging the 100 Sari project pact.
That's
Pranati,
right.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
So last year, these two women in Bangalore, I think they started this 100 Sari Pact, and the idea was to wear saris 100 times in that year, that is 2015, and take pictures and post them on this website. And they encouraged women around the country to do the same thing, and they got a fantastic response. So, you had women wearing saris. I mean, I
And
have
this
friends who
was
did this.
tied to the handloom preservation, like sort of the act, right? Because
So
there
this
was-
is not tied expressly to the Handloom Act, but it's sort of two things coincided. You had the 100 Sari Pact, and then you also had a petition that was started by a woman called Laila Tayabji. She is the founder of Dastakar, this fantastic NGO that works with Indian artisans. And essentially there was a move from the Powerloom lobby to strike certain items off the handloom list. Like they wanted things like saris and lungis to be struck off the list so that they could legally make 100% cotton, 100% silk saris on powerlooms. I mean, they're doing it anyway illegally, but they wanted to do it legally. And so this petition was to stop that. We don't know what has, actually come to that.
But that's interesting what you mentioned about being mall rat, because I'm thinking the kind of person who shops at a Zara or a Mango or whatever, like, are they really sort of, is this really targeting them, or is it targeting the kind of like, the person who wanted to shop slightly consciously and whose only alternative was a Fab India, which was sort of making
Or
really,
an OMO also,
doing
yeah.
these sort of
Smaller
very kind of
boutiques.
like,
Yeah.
but very sort of repetitive kind of stuff, and you knew exactly what you could look at that. You could look at their clothes and say, okay, I know where this is from.
Yeah, but I mean, the sort of like Pranati said, like the Fab India sort of aesthetic has changed now.
Yeah.
Right,
So-
which is
why
not so cool anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
But
this
what this
sort of-
is giving you is an alternative. It's giving you an alternative to Zara, which sells you very expensive but well designed
But this
clothes.
is not exactly cheap, right?
This is
because
not
this
cheap.
is all
It's
designer.
not cheap, but you know what? I would rather pay good money for this because
Because
it's
it is
not
our heritage as well.
It's heritage.
Yeah.
It's not mass produced, and I would be paying the same thing in Zara, which is not cheap at all.
Exactly. I mean, just taking my case, I go to Zara pretty frequently, and I am now also checking out exhibitions like whatever
The Vintage
the
Garden,
Vintage Garden, which
Little
have
Flea.
which have these brands or which have these fabrics or textiles on display and sale, and I may not be able to invest in it right away, but it's something I'm considering. So it's already for a Zara customer to think that way. I think it's a great,
Yeah, because I mean, you're getting, you're getting those Western cuts. You're getting the kind of sort of designs that Zara would offer you in this fantastic fabric.
In fact, if ikat became popular on Western runways, which I totally see it happening at some point, if it hasn't already in like Spain and stuff, Zara's going to adopt it. You know, or something that resembles ikat, because I don't know about authenticity.
Yeah, but then
Zara.
it'll be fake ikat.
Yeah.
It'll be the ikat print and not
Exactly,
real ikat.
exactly.
But yeah, I really would not want to see ikat in Zara or any Indian fabric.
So are there any labels, Pranati, that you sort of recommend people check out? Maybe their Facebook pages?
We did like a best of worst of fashion week on our site recently, and some of the best actually feature this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, if I could afford it, and this is, I think, the third time we're bringing up affordability since we're poor startup folk. So this fashion week, a lot of people had used handloom textiles. So there was someone called Injiri who did sort of amazing clothes. Then Hemang Agarwal used a lot of interesting Banarsi brocade. Then Pero by Aneet Arora has
the clothes are fantastic.
Yeah, and she's always used
so expensive, Delhi based.
Yeah,
Pero
but she's
Delhi.
always used handloom textiles.
What about like Akaro and some of the sari brands like Raw Mango? No, they're also
Raw Mango is all it's all handloom.
Right.
Then Anavila, which is who's very hip.
Yeah, her saris are fantastic.
Her saris are fantastic.
It's a she, I think. Yeah,
it is a she. Yeah, and her name is Anavila.
Oh, her name. Okay.
And so her stuff is entirely handmade. Very simple, very clean lines.
And if I wanted to just sort of go out to like a regular fabric shop, will I find like ikat and stuff? I mean, and this is an ignorant
question.
question.
And then go to your tailor and say, "Ye pattern bana dena."
Zara ki shape mein ye fabric.
But no, this is what we've always done, right? We've always copied stuff and gone to our tailor.
Yeah, so we're not suggesting you sort of steal from the poor indie designer who's trying to make a living, but go to Zara and copy all the designs and make them.
Well, Zara is copying everything else.
Yeah,
there's nothing original. Zara's synonymous.
So and then just sort of like go and say
Yeah, and frankly, everyone
Master
copies. Everyone copies from everyone.
So much Zara bashing. Guys, H&M is coming up in Lower Parel in Big Bazaar.
But in Bombay, some great places to get material are Crawford Market. There's a wonderful shop called Vulcan. It's super old school, but
like Vulcan salute.
Yeah, the
Star
Vulcan
Trek
salute.
fan.
If you show them the salute, they won't know what you're
There's
doing.
a Vulcan bank at Churchgate. I was like, what?
Yeah, and Crawford Market itself, you'll have to go sort of into the gullies, but some great cloth markets over there. There's Manish Market, which is a wholesale market, and just in your normal matching centers all over the city, you
and
get
there are tons
great
of
stuff.
exhibitions, so definitely go check them out.
Yeah, Kumaraswamy Hall is always having exhibitions.
That's at the museum, right?
The
Prince of
CSMVS.
Wales, right?
/ CSMVS. They're always having textile
What
exhibitions.
about artisans? Do they also do?
Artisans is always showcasing these indie guys who do great things with textile and dyes.
Yeah.
So Artisans is another place to keep on your radar.
Super. Great.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be dressing a bit differently.
There's clearly nothing for guys in any of this, but
Well, there is.
No, there's ikat prints for men.
But I don't know, Amit.
Madras checks.
Given
You
Madras
should be wearing
checks,
Madras checks, Amit. You're like
given your fondness for plaid.
ambassador for
Yeah. Well, so that's it for the scene, and we'll be back with
Metro Station.
Hi, I'm May, and I'm a huge fan of the indie music scene in our country. A scene that's relatively underground, even though it sometimes speaks its head overground, but there's no shortage of talent, and I get the privilege of interviewing some of the most awesome musicians on my show. I've had the likes of Euphoria, Kirsch Kale, Hardcore, Randolph Correa. I've had singer-songwriters, folk singers, electronic music producers, playback singers, rappers, fusion artists, instrumentalists, classical musicians, and so on. Whether mainstream or not, these people have chosen to release their original music, and these are the people currently shaping the direction in which our music scene is heading. Join me on my show every Monday and tune in to discover the unique talent coming out of India today. You can catch Made in India on your favorite podcasting app or our very own IVM podcast app.
Metro Station.
So this week in Metro Station, we've actually got our first guest on the show. We have Gopal MS. Most of you may know him as Mumbai Paused if you're on Instagram, and Slogan Murugan if you're on Twitter. He's a copywriter and he has a very keen eye for, Bombay, and we're discussing his pictures and his work in this section where Amit and Pranati have interviewed him.
So we have Gopal MS with us, and Mumbaikars who are on Instagram and are active on Instagram are probably aware of his feed. It's called Mumbai Paused, and it's really, really popular. So we're going to talk to Gopal about his photography. And Amit, you have a question that you've been dying to ask him.
Yeah, well, firstly, welcome to the Podcast, Gopal.
Thank
you have the honor of being our very first guest.
Yeah, we've never had a guest before. You're our first guest.
So, now... I just wanted to ask you, firstly, a couple of things is your Instagram handle is called Mumbai Paused.
Correct.
Now, why is it called Mumbai Paused again? Because your Twitter handle is Slogan Murugan, which is a great name because it has 2 puns, not just one. It's Slogan because you're a copywriter, and Murugan because, of course,
and Amit here is particularly fond of puns.
Yeah, so it's like so many puns, so many layers in just one name. But why Mumbai Paused?
Okay, it began with... I used to blog earlier.
Okay.
For a brief time, I was staying in Bangalore, where I used to have a blog, and there the roads were mains and crosses. So I had a blog which said, which main, what cross.
Okay.
So when I moved here for work, so I continued that same habit of blogging and clicking pictures of streets.
Okay.
So I was looking for a name, and I couldn't find anything good, actually. So, you have the usual Mumbai, all those things. But you would have loved it, but but it was usually used to death. So then I thought it's a city that's always on the move.
Okay.
So I thought when you click pictures, you stop it.
Okay.
So I'm trying, making sense of a fast-moving city by pausing it.
Okay.
And usually what happens when I click a picture, or most people, when you analyze a picture later, you notice a lot of things that you have captured, which you didn't actually see when you were moving. So pausing a picture causes you to see, things. So hence
it's like you're pausing the city.
Yeah, you're pausing.
And also because, photographs are stills.
Correct.
So many layers are being divided.
But what I really wanted to ask you was, what does MS stand for?
Okay. It stands for Mangalat, which is my mother's family name.
Okay.
And Sukumara Pillai, which is my father's name.
So you could have had that in your name. It's only just...
I come from... MS. But people who have MS are usually good at something. So
right.
Bill Gates.
MS Subbulakshmi.
Dhoni. MS Swaminathan, the agriculture man.
Of course.
Correct.
Okay, now let's actually ask you about your
some real
photographs.
questions about your photographs. But you know what I really like about your photographs is that you don't take any pretty pictures. And a lot of, Bombay photography, it's fairly cliched. Most of it is centered on, the heritage district and
not just the heritage district. There'll be typical places like if it's not, South Bombay, then it'll be Bandra, then it'll be
right. But here you're, of course you live in Vashi and you work in Chembur, so most of your pictures are of those areas. But it's really refreshing that it's not of the usual cliched areas, and you don't take pretty pictures, and you don't use filters aggressively.
Actually, I try to take pretty pictures, but they don't turn out.
Now, I want to ask you, is that because, you said that you live in Vashi, you work in Chembur, so the photographs you typically take are along the eastern side of the city. Now, is that consciously something that the photographs happen to not be what you'd call a sort of very pretty side of Bombay, or is it
No, it's not.
Just happens to be that the eastern side of the city is not as pretty as the...
No, eastern side is actually a little more... it retains a lot of characters which are being covered up in the western suburb. Western suburb is also interesting. There are pockets which are very interesting.
Yeah.
But eastern is a little more wider open spaces, even not as crowded.
Yeah.
And then the kind of newer immigrants, for example, Shivaji Nagar, that area. And then it's a little more cheaper, real estate way. So there are a lot of things that are very different from western suburb. It's the same city, the character is the same. It's a little slower, for example, and So, but it's not intentional. I live there,
Sure.
but earlier I used to work in western suburbs. I mean, I used to work at Ogilvy. I was working with Ogilvy in western suburbs. But the thing is, it's the method of shooting.
Yeah.
I don't particularly go to shoot a picture to certain places. Like, for example, people take a Sunday off and go to a certain place and click buildings.
Yeah.
I don't usually do that. I do it, but not often. But I might not go there. I might go to I might go to a fishing village.
Yeah.
For example. So what happens is, one is consciously I try to shoot what others are not shooting, because there's so much to the city.
Yeah.
It's the same with every city. I used to do that in Bangalore. I used to do here. For example, there are roads.
Yeah.
People shoot the roads. But I discovered that if there's a drain intersecting the road, the place gets interesting. So I thought, why not follow the drain?
Okay.
So that's how I started shooting the Mithi River. I mean, long time back. So the drains are more interesting because it's the backside. It's our backside.
Yeah.
What we throw goes into our drains.
Yeah.
And there's a whole economy. There's like Dharavi, for example, is completely built around waste.
Yeah.
Because it is along the biggest drain in the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And can you sort of exemplify that contrast you were talking about between the eastern suburbs and the western suburbs?
See, the difference is, there is a certain madness. I mean, when you live in Navi Mumbai like me, and when you come to Bombay, it's a completely different city.
Yeah.
So there's an energy to the western suburbs, which is and a madness, which is missing in eastern suburbs. I mean, eastern suburbs is where people live, then they go to work somewhere else. They also work there, but you don't find all these guys with Kida as much as you find in Andheri or Bandra or any of the creative. It's the creative. It's the spirit of Mumbai that you have. The filmmakers. You meet any filmmaker, a struggler, you meet a writer, songwriters, wannabe songwriters.
It sounded very, polite the way you said it. You don't have people with the Kida.
Yeah, but when you live in western suburb, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of every day. But when you come from outside and you see people, the way they dress, everybody. I mean, everybody has some quirky thing to them in the western side, which is very refreshing.
Okay.
I mean, it's refreshing when you come from outside, but if you live here, they might get a little.
Hey, you're dressed like a hipster today. You're wearing a No Nasties t-shirt. So,
Yeah, but now you've done several series. Okay, and a lot of them they're pretty cheeky. Like, I like your Mumbai on a Leash series. I mean, how did that start? And you also have the Design Devi Prasanna series. So can you just tell us a little bit about these two?
Mumbai on a Leash actually it goes back a long way. With this, I think many years back, I think online, initial days of the internet, I was reading an article in Dawn, the Pakistani newspaper, the Karachi-based newspaper, and there was this one story which had an illustration. It was a story about, I don't remember the story now, but I remember a picture where a steel tumbler was attached to a chain. And it was just like that. I don't remember the illustrator, I don't remember who did it, but it was an image that stuck to me. So since then, every time I see something which is attached to a string, I used to think of this story. And then one day I thought I actually saw a lot of pens, very strange things which are being tied, especially in Mahim. I think
all kinds of things like hens.
I saw a kid who was tied. I mean,
what? Oh God! No, but that you have those parents who have those leashes now.
Correct,
that's a sort of modern sort of way of
This is more. It looked more like the old Lord Krishna tied to that. That kind of thing. He must have been a really naughty kid. So you find all kinds of strange things. Then I thought, okay, let me make it a series. So I'm a copywriter. So first thing that comes to my mind is labeling it and putting a name or a slogan to it.
Yeah, you recently had a really sort of this cute pic of a bunch of kids who were, like you said, forming a train, and then one of the bogies had to go and take a break.
Correct. You see that. That is something that you'll find in eastern suburbs, which you'll not find in western. You might, but not likely. There are places in western suburbs like Gilbert Hill and that area where you find that kind of life, that kind of people. But in eastern suburb, you see this, and which is actually another story. I look for kids playing. Okay. Because why kids playing? Because the number one problem in Bombay is space.
Yeah. Right. And so you've done a playground series.
I'm doing a playground series. So my whole intention is to just highlight the fact slowly. It's not going to change in a day or something. But the fact that we don't have spaces and the kids are. For example, again, contrast. I live in Navi Mumbai, which has excellent parks.
Yeah.
The parks are awesome. I think no other Indian city will have so many parks where you can actually go any time of the day and kids can play. Very clean, well-maintained parks. And you just cross the bridge and it's like... there are parks, but they're all within buildings. If you're rich and you're building, it's gated.
It's not exactly a park.
It's a gated playground. Whereas Navi Mumbai, you will find somebody in a BMW coming and dropping his kids off to play, as well as the poor kids from the street playing on the same swing So which is something that is missing here.
Right. Well, tell us about the design series. I mean, why design Devi Prasanna? Tell us about the slogan.
Okay,
first.
Design Devi Prasanna. If you have noticed our Konkan lorries, I mean Bombay lorries that carry bricks and sand, and they have any Devi Prasanna, which is, it could be any Devi, it could be Mumbai Devi Prasanna, it could be any any. That's it's a very Indian thing. The lorries, you find it even in South. It's a Maharashtra, I think Karnataka and Telugu. I mean Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. In these 4 states, you find this thing called Devi Prasanna. So basically from the top, from the Devi. So I thought they have beautiful designs. So it started off with these lorries that carry sand, and they have beautiful designs. For example, if you notice, in Bombay, they all have waves on the side.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have waves, and there are different types depending on the owner. If it is a Hindu owner, it will be a proper wave. But if it's a Muslim or somebody follows Islam, then the waves are actually graphical.
Right.
I mean, it is not an actual wave, but it will be a graphical representation of a wave. And there are many versions of it, which are very interesting.
Wow.
So then I thought I'll document that.
Is this something that you were stuck in traffic and decided suddenly one day that, wow, these will be great to follow?
Yeah, actually, once I was driving with my family towards Manor, which is on the Ahmedabad highway, and I had a flat. And I was stuck at a pancha shop, which had all these lorries. So I spent around 10 minutes just clicking all of them, and I had a series.
Yeah.
So when do you usually take your pictures? Is it on the way to work or?
On my way to work. Right. I always carry a camera. It's always in my pocket. So
your phone camera?
Both.
Okay.
In between, for almost a year and a half, I shot exclusively with my phone camera. But the thing is, they're good. I mean, phone cameras are good now, but there's a certain depth that is missing.
Right.
And sometimes you get beautiful shots, and you realize, oh shit, I wish I could blow this up, or I wish I had got a better picture. Right. So, like I said, I tried to capture more beautiful pictures, but that's part of the tech.
But what's also interesting is that you're documenting the city, sort of archiving the city, but in a non-obvious way. Like, for instance, your typeface series, right? But you did like the series of like shop fronts with different interesting typefaces, really sort of vintage-looking type of cursive, lettering that you don't really see anymore. So again, is that something that you seek out to do? Yeah, that's something I seek out. One is because I'm from an advertising background, so I work with a lot of illustrators and typographers. My art partners are usually guys who specialize in typography, and they're very good at it. So it's also, these are things that I can use at work. In fact, shooting streets began that way, because what happens when I was working, earlier when I was working with the bigger agencies. Now I work for a small one, which is more of a design shop. When you work in a big agency, it's almost like a jail. And I mean, if you have been to any of the big agencies, you'll know it's all cubicles, and people work all the time. We are either in a studio like this, or we go to we are in a recording studio. Our only outing is when we go for a shoot or on a holiday where we avoid people but stick to family. So the thing was, people were like me and my colleagues, we were all losing touch with the people we are doing ads for. I mean, you don't know how people consume your products. How are you going to write ads for them? So this is an attempt to actually it's behavior of people. That's how it started. It became something else, but it was also a way to just move away from a cubicle. The flip side is I don't enjoy advertising as much, because once you get used to the street and the life around, suddenly advertising is dull. That is the...
Right. But I mean, has it helped you understand the consumer psyche better?
Definitely. It also made me a little more skeptical about consumerism. I mean, it makes me a better advertising person, because I'm not asking you to just consume. Maybe I'll ask people to consider it or think it helps me make better advertising.
But again, can you give us like an example of how this worked out?
See, it's like for example, I'll give you an example of Pepsi and all these brands. once upon a time they used to do the main advertising.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of Thumbs Up, Taste the Thunder.
Yeah.
Earlier when the ads used to come out, there used to be a certain buzz around it because there's no social media. That's other thing. But now if you do advertising, if you tell somebody to buy something, they're not going to actually, they take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
People have become very smart. They like experience. So, if you, for example, you take something like Paper Boat. I'm giving an example of an ad, which is going on emotions, about nostalgia.
Exactly.
And if it connects with you, you might buy that product, which works more better than, say, a regular sugary drink ad these days. It's a shift. So it helps you, like when you to understand nostalgia, you have to live through it. And otherwise you will not. So good advertising comes from insights in real life. I mean, ideas.
But are you really sort of capturing the Bombay of the people that you're advertising to? Because a lot of the Bombay that we see through your photographs is really sort of the kind of Bombay that you don't really see. Like, for example, you photograph markets and you photograph, like, you're not photographing malls, you're actually photographing markets, and you photograph markets outside, say, railway stations and things like that. And you really get to see the quirky products that they sell there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, see, it is not expressed that way, but the people who I assume come to my blog to see are people who, like, for example, you go to work in a car or in a train, and you don't have time to go and see these places. So I'm assuming that this it's a reminder that these things exist and there are other people. So that is how it works. So it is not expressed. So, but it's like taking a patli gali or the road less travelled, and which are as lively.
And do you have any sort of favorite places where you go to, wander, or is it primarily your work?
Like on a Sunday, if you had to go out and shoot.
I prefer crowded places because more character. Bombay is crowds, and the more crowded, usually there's something happening. Crowds are good markets. Then places like Kurla or even town that have lots of Grand Road, around Grand Road area. Wherever people congregate are beautiful. Anything close to the sea is great. I mean, sea and related things, because it's usually nice.
You get a pretty picture.
You try to get better pictures,
Right. And you did one of the Marol fishing market recently.
Marol fishing market. While taking the metro, I've seen that crowd over there on Saturdays a lot. So I thought one day I have to go and check it out. So one day I just got on at Chakala station and went to the, actually there's a dry fish market there. I wanted to buy some fish and take some pictures, and then I discovered the market. I mean, it's been there forever, but for me it was fresh. And do you have, sort of, what I find is also that even though you're, like we're saying, not necessarily talking about a very pretty side of Bombay, but there are certain things about the city that also you are a little bit heartening, like your whole free drinking water series, right? Correct.
Again, like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
You see these everywhere during Eid, right? And
that is how I think. That is when it is seen most.
Right.
But it's like, for example, a long time back, I think there was a entire movement. I think it was Shiv Sena, before Shiv Sena was formed, or probably when they were just formed. They had this thing about drinking water in Udupi hotels. So they had a big movement or a thing telling them to serve water for people. Like if you get down at Kurla station and go to the nearest Udupi, there are always glasses of water kept there for anybody to drink. Anybody can walk and drink that water and go. So it's a drinking free water is a Western Indian, like Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra. It's a concept which is very alive in this part of India. Whereas I come from Bangalore, where you don't get water. Nobody gives water. People, except for certain areas, people are not as friendly. Bombay is a very friendly city. Bangalore is sometimes can be very, very, very bad. Probably it's many reasons to it, but when a person from Bangalore comes in and they see somebody being friendly, the first thing they think is it like a Bollywood film where he's going to cheat me? That is how people from South actually look at Bombay, because they are not used to so much friendliness. I mean,
which is kind of again another heartening thing about the city, because you usually sort of, I mean, when increasingly sort of people are living in gated communities and things like that.
So this whole thing about water is actually the contrast, because I come from advertising, where what we do is the whole industry most of it, I think, at least 90% of it is built on making people afraid of everything. And the major thing among that is the water that you drink. We are always telling that the water you drink is unsafe. For whatever, you have to sell a product, distillery, whatever it is. But it has such a big impact on a city. Like distillery, I think is criminal. I mean, just because of they're doing legitimate business. They have no problem with it.
It's not mineral water, firstly. It's bottled water, but it's filtered bottled water.
Yeah,
so we shouldn't be calling it.
So the thing is that there is water which is pretty decent and drinkable, which I drink all the time, available everywhere for free in Bombay.
Yeah,
and but you are frightening all the mothers in the world. And all kids carry one Bisleri, that 5 rupee Bisleri bottle that they used to advertise long time back. Summertime you used to have those.
And contribute to plastic waste.
Yeah, contribute. There are many layers to it, but the most thing is shared. We are becoming exclusive, whereas this is a city that is built on inclusivity.
Right.
Yeah.
So the water is actually, as I call the spirit of Mumbai is water. Okay. What you call the spirit of Mumbai is actually water that you give free for people to drink, or to birds or animals. Right. And it's such a beautiful thing that the city has destroyed. Yeah. And it's not being destroyed. There are still people who give it out. So that's the thing I'm capturing.
That's great. And I mean, on the flip side of this, your recent series is also about how many trees are being cut down and stuff like that. So I mean, if you haven't checked out Gopal's Instagram feed or blog, you should go there like right now. It's called Mumbai Pause. You know why it's called Mumbai Pause. And just before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you, do you have, I know this is a very sort of difficult question to ask, do you have like a favorite image or at least a favorite place that you like sort of, capturing?
There are many favorite images, but one among them is I have a picture of a photographer from Kurla who runs a small studio who was on the banks of the Mitti in Mahim Nature Park. Yeah. And it's the dirtiest place imaginable. It was raining, it was stinking, the whole place, the water, it was high tide, so the water was filled with plastic and dirt. Okay. And this guy was taking a picture, a nice beautiful landscape picture of a client, one small boy. And in the background you have the BKC's towers. So he was framing it in such a way that the city looked good. And he got a beautiful picture too. But it's like that picture shows the way people improvise, how they make do with what is available, and then make everything look beautiful. So I like that picture. And I think any favorite places, I like all places. I like the heritage part of the city. I like the old parts of the city. I like Dadar and the place like Masala Gully or the Chivda Gully, Lal Bagh area, the mills, old mills, that area. I like these are some of my favorite places. And mangroves. I love where the sea. Mangroves or wherever there's sea, the water.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're finding that increasingly when you return to these places, things have changed and things are disappearing, and so
things are like, for example, mangroves. But change is part of Mumbai, and I mean it's like it keeps changing. But I hope they don't destroy the at least the mangroves and places like that which offer us some breathing space.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks, Gopal. It was great to finally meet you and talk to you. We've only seen your pictures, and we've interacted over email and the phone before. But yeah, do check out Gopal's blog and his Insta feed. And
and on Twitter you are Slogan
Murugan. So, yeah, they are the same person. Mumbai Paused and Slogan Murugan are the same. Right. So we'll be back next week.
If you like listening to the podcast, check out Geek Fruit, hosted by Uber geeks Tejas Menon and Jishnu Guha. This show talks about geek culture from an Indian perspective. Star Wars, comic books, science fiction and fantasy, TV shows and more.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.